Welcome to the podcast that brings you high voltage, intriguing information, as well as electrifying conversation on all topics, current, past, and yet to be. This is Phase to Phase.
The first step in avoiding a trap is knowing of its existence.
I've been having these weird thoughts lately.
Without change, something sleeps inside us and seldom awakens.
Here are your hosts, Marcus and Drew.
All right, you want to get started?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
How you doing over there?
Besides the incredible frustration with our audio equipment, I'm okay.
Yeah, you sound like you're ready to tear that freaking that laptop in half.
Flip.
Well, if if that didn't get you super upset or whatever, this next topic absolutely will. Today we're going to be doing a deep dive into into prisons, I guess, in general.
Dun 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 dun.
Awesome.
Great song, though.
That should really be the intro if you think about it. So yeah, hey everybody, welcome again to another episode of Face to Phase. For this episode, we're going to be diving deep and dark, the antithesis of human freedom, basically, in all the different ways that we as human beings like to incarcerate one another.
Maybe we'll find out why the caged bird sings.
Indeed. And just to get us kind of started, whatever, we'll do how I like to do here on this podcast, and that's begin everybody out on some terms so we're kind of all on the same. First one we got on the list is a penitentiary. Marcus, you know what that is.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, yeah. It's a prison, also known as like a jail or a gallows, penitentiary detention center, correction center, correctional facility, lockup, remand center. So many euphemisms. And that's actually, we're going to play a little game here today.
Okay.
Called Spot the Euphemism. This topic is laden with that kind of thing because I feel like it's actually kind of essential to kind of get society as a whole on board to certain ideas, and euphemisms are essential to kind of selling that point.
Yeah.
If you say like, a correctional facility, they'll be corrected here.
Yeah. It's digestible.
It's definitely, exactly, yeah.
Like
it's not some like hellhole where like you're going to get shanked or whatever for saying the wrong thing. And so, yeah, there are facilities in which inmates are like forcibly confined and detained, and it comes from the Latin word penitent, feeling of like sorrow or regret for something that you like done. Make you feel bad for the thing you did to society.
Penal.
That's actually next on the state. Next on the list is penal colony, which is just it's basically like a settlement that was used to exile prisoners and separate them from like the general population and placing them like in a remote location, often like on an island or like distant colonial territory, i.e. Australia.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. The entire country and culture of Australia was created that way. Historical penal colonies often been used, for labor and for economically underdeveloped parts of, states or territories or whatever. And it's usually like on a much larger scale than like a little prison farm, for instance. Next on the list is black sites, which is kind of a callback from season 1, episode 2. Black site is just a location that is unacknowledged black projects and black operations where that's conducted. And it can refer to like the facilities that are controlled by like the CIA, U.S. government, their allies and stuff like that.
Or just the projects.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
I'm just going to throw all kinds of jokes in here.
Please do.
Because like the 9/11 episode. Yeah,
it's dark and brutal and it kind of needs some levity. Yeah, thank you.
They might not all be great. They might not all be,
That's all right.
Hundreds.
They might not all make it in, so it's fine. And next is black market, which of course is just the underground economy or shadow economy, which sounds so much cooler. It's just a clandestine market or a series of like transactions that has some aspect of illegality, basically. Not allowed, usually characterized by some sort of non-compliant behavior with a certain set of like institutional rules. Next on the list is extraordinary rendition. Marcus, you ever heard of this?
That's a great euphemism.
It is a great euphemism, right? See, already playing. Spot one. Yeah, extraordinary rendition is just like government-sponsored abduction and extrajudicial transfer of like a person from one country to another with the purpose of circumventing the former country's laws on like interrogation or detention or torture.
Yeah.
So like, for instance, if
due process at all.
Yeah, exactly. So if you were the United States and you wanted to scoop somebody up and use extraordinary rendition in order to not have to impose, those pesky American civil rights onto this prisoner that you've now just picked up or whatever. So that way you can do whatever you want without the oversight of, human rights rules. And last on the list is enhanced interrogation, which, again, is probably my favorite euphemism. And it was that program of systemic torture of detainees by the CIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, and, of course, various components of the U.S. Armed Forces at different black sites around the world, famously including Bagram Air Force Base and Abu Ghraib in Afghanistan, as well as Guantanamo Bay Camp 7 in Cuba, authorized by officials of the George W. Bush administration. And that's, of course, where we got all those really gnarly, horrible, notorious pictures of prisoners with, like, bags on their head and stacked in, like, fucked up positions and naked and being kind of led on, like, leashes and you know, soldiers, like, leaning in with, like, a thumbs up. Yeah. You know what I mean? Hey, fucking photo bomb. Not America's proudest moment.
I mean, waterboarding sounds great.
Yeah,
it sounds like
another
euphemism. Like
yeah, exactly, right? Sounds refreshing. Yeah. Methods used include beating, bringing in controlled stress positions, hooding, subject to deafening noises, sleep deprivation to the point of hallucination, deprivation of food, drink, and withholding of medical care for wounds, as well as waterboarding, like you mentioned, walling, even sexual humiliation.
All the classics.
Yeah, exactly. As well as subjugation to extreme heat or cold, confinement in small coffin-like boxes. Several detainees endured medically unnecessary rectal rehydration. And also rectal feeding. In addition to brutalizing detainees, there were threats to their families, such as threats to harm children, threats of sexually abusing, or even cutting the throat of a detainee's mother. So some gnarly threats to kind of get people into, like, the psychological mindset of, like, okay, I'll tell you anything. Yeah. Which is probably not...
Give you a false confession.
Exactly. I was just going to say, it's probably not necessarily the most reliable of
torture does not
methods.
Really work.
Nope. Unless you're in ancient Rome, and then a confession wasn't even considered, like, official unless you tortured them. How effed up was that? Which is like, oh, he confessed to this. Or like, well, did you torture him? Like, well, no, I didn't need to. He confessed. You're like, well, I mean, you know.
That's not going to hold up in court.
Yeah, exactly. And so last on the list here, we're going to be discussing something called immurement. It's from the Latin term im, or in, which just means inside, and muris, which means wall. So literally walling in.
Okay.
Like that terrifying Edgar Allan Poe poem. Immurement is like the form of imprisonment, usually until death, in which a person is placed within an enclosed space with no exits. This includes instances where people have been enclosed in extremely tight confinement, such as within a box or coffin. When used as a means of execution, the prisoner is simply left there to die from starvation or dehydration.
Oh, so it's that thing I do on The Sims all the time. The
Really?
Sim I don't like.
Oh, Jesus. Like, you just wall them up into, like, a spot and just leave them there?
Mode, you put a box around him.
Jesus. Little texts are coming up about,
all
like, asking for food. Yeah, totally.
All the needs go off the charts. Yeah, that's great. That little neighbor kid comes around. I don't like him.
Get out of
Box
here,
him
you.
in.
This form of execution is distinct from being buried alive, in which the victim just typically dies of asphyxiation, which sounds actually way nicer than dying of, like, starvation or exposure. And so this leads me to the Mongolian box, which is kind of like the Boo box, I guess, from Hook, but way worse. In the country's capital, serious crimes that were punished by confining people in small coffin-like boxes and often placed in dark dungeons, but not always. Sometimes they just put them out in the middle of nowhere. Like, drop them off in a truck in, like, a desert, basically. Apart from being given very little food through a hole in their box, prisoners are largely neglected. Many die from exposure or from hypothermia, you know, during summer and winter and night and day differences and such. However, thankfully, this practice was outlawed in 1920, which still isn't really that fucking long ago as far as the barbaric, like, nature of the treatment of these.
I'd be remiss to not mention solitary confinement.
Yes.
Which we stopped for a long time.
Yes, absolutely. Well, we still actually kind of do it still.
No, we do.
Yes,
we definitely do.
yes, but not as bad as it was back in, like, the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s or whatever.
Yeah, but you got those freaking supermax prisons where that's basically all they are. It's just a giant cage.
Yes.
Just a giant people cage.
Yes. It's not as bad as before where, like, they neglected you from, like, light. You know what I mean? But it's still pretty awful because you're completely separated from other human beings.
23 hours a day.
Yeah, totally. And
it's bad enough you got these shelter-in-place orders, but I mean...
Right, totally. At least we have the internet, for fuck's sake. Like, Jesus. Can you imagine if we didn't have, like, taquitos and porn, how crazy we would go? People are already going crazy. Have you looked at outside lately? It's fucking nuts. Yeah, that reminds me of this, of how, as far as how bad things used to be in the American, like, justice system, where it's supposed to be treated as, like, a temporary thing, like a timeout session, where you put somebody in the hole for, like, 3 days or whatever, and they come out because they have no concept of time.
No, they don't.
It seems fucking like it's an eternity, and you can't really hear a lot of things or see anything, and no light.
And your mind fills in the gaps.
Oh my God, dude. Can you imagine? You go insane, dude. And basically they pulled him out of solitary confinement. He was like an animal now. He'd been primitivized, if that's a word.
Yeah.
This one documentary I was watching too a long time ago. Yeah, an inmate, basically what he would do is he would, once he got into the confinement center, or to the hole, would rip off a button from his shirt, throw it somewhere, and then spin around like 4 times, and then spend the next like 6 hours looking for the button. Jeez. That's how he kept himself sane.
Yeah. Gotta do something, dude.
Bro. And of course, there's a lot of, say, examples of interesting like prisons and detention centers and stuff kind of throughout history and throughout the world. And obviously, we're not going to cover all of them. I just picked a smattering of interesting examples. Yeah. First of which here is Fort Sumter, which is a Confederate POW camp from back in the day. The American Civil War saw like numerous prison camps constructed, held just like thousands and thousands and thousands of soldiers, right? So in 1861 to 63, most were immediately paroled. After the parole exchange system broke down in 63, hundreds of thousands went to prison camps. So basically it was like a 1-for-1 trade until something happened. And that something basically was that collapse of the exchange program, like I was just mentioning, was because Confederacy refused to treat black prisoners the same as whites. Big surprise. They said they were probably ex-slaves and belonged to their masters and didn't belong to the Union Army per se, right? So the South needed the exchanges much more than the North did because of the severe manpower shortages in the Confederacy. So in 1864, Ulysses Grant, noting this like prisoner gap, because the Union camps held far more prisoners than the Confederate ones, decided that the growing prisoner gap gave him like a decisive military advantage. And
you can't have a prisoner gap.
He therefore opposed wholesale exchanges until the end was in sight. And so around 5,600 Confederates were allowed to join the Union Army, which was bizarre. Yeah. Known as galvanized Yankees. And these troops were stationed in the West basically to go face the Native Americans. So they were kind of kept them out of the main.
So crazy.
Yeah, kept them out of the main, story. Dude. And
so Confederate prisoners going to fight for the Union to go fight their other enemies.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, well, we're not going to put you on the front lines because we don't trust you 100%. Right. We'll just put a gun in your hand and go shoot those pesky fucking Indians. Like, these camps were notoriously brutal, and by far the most notorious of all was Camp Sumter. And this was one of the Confederate camps that was in Georgia near the town of Andersonville. And Sumter was reportedly built to house 10,000 prisoners, but actually ended up holding up almost 50,000. Here, prisoners would arrive by train and herded into stockades, which are just, upright wooden prisoners.
Pastures.
Yeah, exactly. Human cattle pastures, for real. Prisoners were required to build their own shelters in the camp. And thousands died from exhaustion and neglect. Observers witnessed 100 corpses were removed from the camp daily. And some of them were murdered by other prisoners. People would be robbing each other in the camp for food and different resources and stuff, right? And of course, like all this gang warfare would break out into the camp because of the overcrowding and lack of supplies. Yeah. And so during a period of 14 months, 13,000 of the Union soldier POWs confined died, which was like 28%. These terrible conditions were obviously causing prisoners to attempt escape, so that the guards formed a no man's land, or like a death line, a shooting line around the camp. And basically anybody who crossed it, of course, would be shot from one of the guard towers. At one point, the fort was the 5th largest city in Confederate America.
Oh my God.
And apparently when the camp was liberated, it was difficult to distinguish corpses from survivors because everybody was just so skinny and emasculated, right? And unfortunately, things in the North were no better, dude. At a place called Camp Douglas in Chicago, Illinois, 10% of its Confederate prisoners died during one cold winter month. There's another one called Elmira Prison up in New York State, where the death rate of the camp was 25%. So super brutal times back in the Civil War. So good thing though human beings didn't carry that kind of darkness into the future. Yeah.
No. That was the last time.
Right? Well, until we get to this example here. Number 2, American internment camps in World War II. Oh. So most people would be like, what are you talking about, American internment camps? Only the Germans, they had internment camps. They were the ones that had the concentration camps, not Americans. We wouldn't do that. In the United States during World War II, the forced relocation and incarceration into these camps on the western interior country of about 120,000 people of Japanese ancestry, most of whom lived on the Pacific coast. So 62% of the internees were straight up United States citizens, dude.
Yeah.
Like full blown, these people absolutely have rights under the Constitution, but that didn't seem to matter. These actions were ordered by the President FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, shortly after Imperial Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor. However, in Hawaii were 150,000 plus Japanese Americans, which composed over 1/3 of the entire population. And there only 12 to 1,800 were interned there in Hawaii. Japanese Americans were incarcerated based on local population concentrations and regional politics. The internment is considered to have resulted more from panic and bigotry than from any actual, security
threat.
risk. Yeah, threat posed by the Japanese Americans.
Yeah. I mean, most people that I've heard accounts from, they were just incredibly ashamed and horrified that their home country would do something
like this. And what sucks is that not everybody went along with it, but it still took like a long time for the voices of opposition to actually be heard, and which is ridiculous to me because it's a constitutional right, dude. Like it's one of the most sacred rights we have is due process and freedom, and like you can't just take things away just because you don't feel like I deserve it. Yeah. California defined anyone with 1/16 or more Japanese lineage as sufficient to be interned, dude, which is insane to me. It's like we're in the middle of World War II fighting this. Our enemy is literally practicing like eugenics and shit. And here we are like kind of also tacitly kind of like agreeing with it by going like, well, if you're like a 16th or more, dude, sorry. Like
you're not a pure blood. Yeah,
exactly. Those are literal like blood libel laws from fucking like 1939 Germany, dude. A Colonel Carl Bendenson, an architect behind the program, went so far as to saying anyone with, quote, 1 drop of Japanese blood qualified. So Roosevelt authorized Executive Order 9066. 9066.
Executive Order.
Right, exactly. To get rid of all the Jedi. Issued on February 19th, 1942, which allowed regional military commanders to designate, quote, military areas from which, quote, any or all persons may be excluded, end quote. Although the executive order did not mention Japanese Americans, this authority was used to declare that all people of Japanese ancestry were required to leave Alaska and the military exclusion zones from all of California and parts of Oregon, Washington, and Arizona. However, internment was not limited to those of Japanese ancestry, but included people of German and Italian ancestry as well. Germans were deported from Latin America to the United States, German Americans even. And it was interesting. So they put all the camps for Italians and Germans kind of near the East Coast, kind of like the Midwest East Coast kind of. And then all the Japanese ones kind of somewhat-ish on the Westy kind of coast or whatever. Keeping them regional.
Just where they're concentrated.
Right.
They're
at this camp. All right, so number 3 we got here on the list, which is the big heavy hitter here. This is the Xinjiang internment camps or re-education camps for Patriot Training and de-extremification for Uyghur Muslims in China.
Patriot Training.
Yeah, again, euphemisms. Well done. Good job, Marcus. Someone's paying attention.
I found one.
Miss Clifton. The Xinjiang re-education camps, officially called Vocational Education and Training Centers by the government of the People's Republic of China, are internment camps that have been operated by the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region government for the purposes of indoctrinating Uyghurs since 2017 as part of a, quote, People's War on Terror, announced in 2014. When I read that, I was like, China copies everything for us. You know what I mean? Like, first it's our intellectual property, and then it's our technology, and now they're stealing our war on terror. Like, fuck off. Get your own, like, crusades. Yeah, for real. We made this guy up. You can't just have him. The camps were established under Xi Jinping's administration and led by Party Security Secretary Shen Quango. Forgive me if I'm screwing up these words, but his names rather. Yeah, exactly. I'm American though. Fuck you. So they can learn our fucking language. These camps were reportedly operated outside the legal system, and many Uyghurs have reportedly been interned without trial and often no charges levied against them at all. So evidently they're just like V for Vendetta black bagging these people and just shipping them off and to be straight up disappeared. Yeah. And
God knows where.
Who the fuck knows? Yeah.
Knows what to them.
Local authorities have reportedly hundreds of thousands of these Uyghurs in these camps, as well as members of the ethnic minority group, for the stated purposes of countering extremism and terrorism and promoting assimilation. I'm going to take a little break here to kind of mention to you and everybody that it's hard. While I was researching this topic, it was kind of hard to find like a lot of, agreed upon facts.
Yeah, the CCP likes to bury.
Yeah, they do. They have an iron grip on their freaking communications in and out of the country. And I've read reports that just was saying just a second ago of like hundreds of thousands of Uyghurs being imprisoned. I've read one that was 1 million. I've read one that was 2 million. And frankly, I would.
Is the population? I mean.
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, Jesus Christ, China itself, or whatever's got 1 point whatever billion or whatever, and then in this region alone, I think there's like 400 million people. And the facility, bro, is fucking huge, dude. It looks like the Gigafactory, but like for people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like the biggest structure you've seen with your eyes that human beings have made. Just that in and of itself is like breathtaking. And then when you have like the realization for what it's for, this is literally like a monument to the depths of like human darkness.
Pretty much.
Leaked Chinese government documents, which the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists have labeled, quote, the China cables, include a 9-page memo sent out in 2017 by Zhu Halun, then Deputy Secretary of Xinjiang's Communist Party and the region's top security official, to those who run the camp. And the instructions pretty much made it clear that the camp should be run as like a high-tech security prison with very strict discipline and punishments and no escape. The memo basically included a couple of bullet points here, and these are all from the memo. Number 1, never allow escape. Number 2, increase discipline and punishment of behavioral violations. 3, promote repentance and confession. 4, make remedial Mandarin studies to top priority. 5, encourage students to truly transform, which I don't know why you had to put that modifier in there of truly transforming.
Well, a lot of these things are already kind of super generic as they are and open to interpretation. And
right. But this is like a directive. Yeah, exactly. This is like a subjective directive to say like, hey, do these things, but also interpret them kind of the way you want to. Exactly. Yeah. And finally, ensure full video surveillance coverage of dormitories and classrooms free of blind spots. Panopticon or whatever that like term is, where you basically have like a guard post that sees in all directions at all times. Yeah. And the prisoners, when they look up, they can't quite tell if the guard is looking at them or not. So they always have the constant assumption. Yes, dude, that you're always being fucking watched, dude. And just the fear of that in and of itself can be such a
damaging to your sight.
Yes, dude. So much so that you might not even necessarily need to have soldiers or guards, rather, I should say, like physical presence. If you just have the fear that you're being watched all the time, that's almost all you need.
Yeah. That's enough to make some people turn on their fellow man.
Straight up, dude. Self-preservation. Yeah. The documents reveal how every aspect of the detainee's life is monitored and controlled. Quote, the students should have a fixed bed position, fixed queue position, fixed classroom seat, fixed station during skills work, and is strictly forbidden for those to be changed.
Just thinking about this, even how bad China treats some of its own citizens who haven't done anything, they don't demonize.
Right.
Take all that sort of mentality and that technology and all the stuff they apply to that and then put it to like who they consider
people they actually want to, people that they want to like hardcore oppress, even though they're oppressing their own people for sure. But this is more of like a overt oppression, whereas the general population kind of just get the
quiet, oppression.
Right, dude, the gradual implementation of tyranny. Quote, implement behavioral norms and discipline requirements for getting up, rolling call, washing, going to the toilet, organizing and housekeeping, eating, studying, sleeping, closing the door, and so forth. So you're literally retraining every aspect, everything, dude. Almost like a perverted way of the samurai kind of aspect or whatever, where you have to relearn how to do everything. And where like the samurai would learn how to do everything perfect, whether it was fucking from using a sword or like literally pouring a cup of tea. Like everything has a perfect way of doing it. Yeah. Other documents confirm the extraordinary scale of the detentions. One reveals that 15,000 people from southern Xinjiang were sent to the camps over the course of just 1 week in 2017. Sophie Richardson, the China director of Human Rights Watch, said that the leaked memo should be used by prosecutors, saying, quote, this is an actionable piece of evidence documenting a gross human rights violation, as well as saying, I think it's fair to describe everyone being detained as being subject to at least a psychological torture, because they literally don't know how long they're going to be there. The memo details how detainees will only be released when they can demonstrate that they have transformed their behavior, their beliefs, and their language. To promote the repentance and confession of the students for them to understand deeply the illegal, criminal, and dangerous nature of their past activities. For those who harbor vague understandings, negative attitudes, and even feelings of resistance, carry out education transformation to ensure that the results are achieved.
Conversion therapy.
Yeah, right, dude.
Works all the time.
Stop being so free.
Believe in my gods. Speak my language.
Yeah, right, exactly. Ben Emerson, a leading human rights lawyer and advisor to the World Uyghur Congress, said the camps were trying to change people's identity.
Yeah.
Right? It sounds exactly what it is. It's like straight up brainwashing, like, call back from freaking all our MK Ultra episodes.
Yeah.
Quote, it is very difficult to view that as anything other than the mass brainwashing scheme designed and directed at an entire ethnic community. It is a total transformation and is designed to specifically wipe the Muslim Uyghurs of Xinjiang as a separate cultural group off the face of the earth. Detainees are awarded points by their, quote, ideological transformation, studying and training in compliance with discipline, the memo says.
You know what's weird? Just to talk this out.
Yep, good, please.
This is not like a very well-formed thought.
Doesn't matter.
But if the Chinese government went in there and just shot everybody, or just dropped a bomb on it,
mm-hmm.
They would get international attention. People would be like,
yes, horrified. Yes.
But if they sneak in, they bag everybody,
mm-hmm.
they throw them into camps, and they convert them, whatever the fuck they're doing.
Then suddenly that's fine. Like, it's like a softer form of tyranny, kind of. Which is kind of bizarre, dude, because who said that? Was there Big New Brzezinski or one of those kinds who said it's easier? It used to be a time when it's easier to control 1 million people than it is to kill 1 million people, and nowadays it's easier to kill 1 million people than it is to control 1 million people. It reminds me of Joker in The Dark Knight when he's like, no one complains if it's part of the plan,
right?
Even if the plan is horrifying. Which is such a good point, dude, because it's like, as long as everybody kind of is like, well, as long as they're not murdering these people outright, you're like, well, it's almost worse to like dedicate all these like resources to like fucking these people's lives up. It'd almost be better just to put a goddamn bullet in them.
That's what I was about to say. Like, part of me is like, if you really want to do that, that would be better.
Well, you know what's, okay, it's a really good point that you brought this up. So you know the reason why they do this?
Giving them mercy,
right? Well, bro, the reason why I think that they do this is because human beings, despite our endless history of conflict and warfare and stuff, human beings, the average human beings, don't like to hurt each other, dude. They really don't. There's a lot of studies or whatever from like World War II and Vietnam and stuff. Yeah, most normal people, exactly.
Even
studies
that get forced to go to war.
Even them, and exactly. And that's what I was going to mention, is a lot of these studies kind of found out years later when they would do psychological like debriefs and stuff like that, found out that a lot of these soldiers, especially the GIs that were like, not even recruited, that were like forcibly folded drafted. Yeah. Obviously didn't want to fucking hurt anybody because they confused why they were there in the first place. They would shoot over the soldiers' heads. They would like intentionally miss because they don't want that on their conscience. Who the fuck would, right? So my point is, despite having an overarching tyrannical government and presence in China that is very normal, it'd still be really hard to put a gun in the average person's hand and say, go kill your fellow like countrymen, right? Yeah. If you can convince them that really they're just wrong and they just need to be reprogrammed. They're sick, bro. Yeah, exactly. They're just sick. Really, you should feel bad for them. Yeah. And you should feel a sympathy and empathy for these people and know that and feel happy that you're part of a government that cares enough about these people to
I'm sure they
fold them into dude, as ridiculous as it sounds of me saying this or whatever, that's literally what they tell people.
They're experts at it.
Yes, exactly, dude. Exactly. They just deliver it in a more palatable form. Yeah. And the punishment and reward system helps determine whether inmates are allowed to contact with family members and when they will be released. So, paroled for good behavior. They're only considered for release once 4 Communist Party committees have seen evidence that they have been transformed. So it's like a parole...
4 different committees?
Yeah, parole board, but like 4 of them. The leaked document also reveals how the Chinese government uses mass surveillance systems and predictive policing programs that analyze personal data. Future crime.
Yeah.
One document shows how the system flagged 1.8 million people simply because they had a data sharing app called Zapaya on their phone. So certain technological things are not allowed or whatever in China. And if you have them, that's instantly like grounds for disappearing.
And I'm sure there's all kinds of backdoors in them anyway.
Guaranteed, dude. The authorities then ordered the investigation of 40,000 of these people one by one. The document said that, quote, if it is not possible to eliminate suspicion, that they should be sent for concentrated training. Again, with euphemisms. The document included explicit directives to arrest Uyghurs with foreign citizenship and to track Uyghurs living abroad. So even if you're a Uyghur living in another country, they're going to be watching you in case you say anything about your family disappearing or whatever in China next door, or if you're in Taiwan or fucking the Philippines, wherever. And if you're visiting in China, like you're there on a student visa or whatever, they got you, bro. If you're in country, sorry, bro. Like you're under our fucking authority now. They suggested that Chinese embassies and consulates are involved in the global dragnet, which of course makes perfect sense. They're like the outposts, you know what I mean?
The satellites,
exactly.
The many arms of the beast.
Right, dude, the many tentacles. Chinese ambassador to the UK, Liu Xiaoming, said that the measures safeguarded local police and that there hasn't been a single terrorist attack in Xinjiang in the past 3 years. Right, so it's, the ends justify the means. Yeah,
not until you piss off this high group of people.
Those 2 million fucking people in Hong Kong taken to the streets.
That's the other point I was going to make is like, you think you're doing this good work and whatever, getting them to be sympathetic to whatever the hell you're trying to do.
Right, whatever your version of that is.
Yeah, but I don't feel like they're thinking about this long-term impact.
No, of course not, dude. It's hard to do that, to take a policy and to try to just see it all the way down to the end of the timeline, dude, the end of the spectrum.
Right.
And a lot of the times it ends up not having the result that you want or whatever. Or maybe it does, and they just, maybe they're well aware of the fucking long-term, like,
who cares?
They don't care anyway. Exactly, yeah, for real.
That's like 10 years from now.
Who knows when that'll be? The Chinese ambassador went on to say, quote, the region now enjoys social stability and unity among ethnic groups. People are living a happy life with a much stronger sense of fulfillment and security. In total disregard of the facts, some people in the West have been fiercely slandering and smearing China over Xinjiang in an attempt to create an excuse to interfere in China's internal affairs and disrupt China's counter-terrorism efforts in Xinjiang and thwart China's steady development. End quote. Right, that's what it is. We're not tripping about all the other human rights violations. It's the fact that we just want to meddle in your fucking country, dude.
Yeah.
But perhaps the most horrific of all, the organs of members of these marginalized groups detained in these Chinese prison camps are being forcefully harvested. Sometimes when patients are still alive in these internal tribunals based on London's findings has concluded. So some reports are as high as 1.5 million detainees in these Chinese prison camps are being fucking killed for their organs to serve in extremely lucrative black market, transplant trades. That is worth some like $1 billion annually. Concluded the China Tribunal, which was an independent body tasked with investigating organ harvesting from prisons inside of China. Their final judgment concluded, quote, forced organ harvesting has been committed for decades throughout China on a significant scale, end quote. The practice is, quote, of unmatched wickedness on a death-by-death basis committed in the last century, end quote. But, to be fair, the Chinese state media said back in 2014 that the practice of organ harvesting from executed prisoners would be phased out and said that it would instead rely on national organ donation systems. So again, euphemisms, donations, sounds good, right? Sounds voluntary. I'm sure it is. In a statement released alongside in the final judgment, the tribunal said many of these affected were practitioners of something called Falun Gong. It's a spiritual discipline that China kind of like banned in the 90s. It's been called an evil cult by the officials. The tribunal added that it was possible that Uyghur Muslims or Falun Gong practitioners have been one and probably the main source of organ supply. Quote, while the concentrated persecution and medical testing of Uyghurs is more recent, end quote. So it's been going on forever. It's just that it's kind of been ramping up a lot lately and finally getting kind of mainstream. In addition, stating that the scale of medical testing of the Uyghurs meant that they could be ended up using them as an organ bank. Which, again, is another euphemism for just murder factory. Allegations of forced organ harvesting really became common mainstream knowledge after a boom in transplant activity was registered in China, with wait times becoming like
suspiciously
unusually short. Yes, exactly. Chinese websites advertise hearts, lungs, kidneys, and livers for sale and available to book in advance. suggesting that the victims were killed on demand.
We don't make it till you order it.
Oh, Jesus.
I'm sorry.
I like to get my lungs fresh. I'm just sick of going into those other chain stores, where the lungs, they're all deflated, and they're sorry, squashed things. Don't look anything like up on the menu. Because we all know that organs have, a short shelf life, right? So they don't keep very well. Several survivors of the prison camps told the tribunal of how they were subjected to physical examinations, including blood tests, x-rays, and ultrasounds. Quote, experts reported that the only explanation of these examinations were to ensure that the victims' organs were healthy and fit for transportation, end quote.
If they find all the people who are healthy and, take them out, then there's less of a chance of resistance and rising up.
Yep, and that's why they're targeting this religious sect, because not only do they fundamentally believe in, the fact that they're practicing something that is other than the worship of the state makes them dangerous, and in addition, because of their religious, practices, they're so, clean, diet-wise,
right,
and treating their bodies as temples, et cetera, that their organs are all pristine or whatever. Right. So it kind of makes them like a double target. So not only are they dissidents in the eyes of the state, but they're also this vast potential resource. Yeah. I was just reading up in here that a liver, for example, dude, a healthy liver can reportedly be sold upwards of $150,000 a piece. And that's just the liver. So if you get the liver, the heart, the lungs, the fucking kidneys or whatever.
The sports package.
Yeah. The deluxe package, please. Extra large. Just on an individual basis, not let alone on a mass scale, would be quite lucrative. In a statement accompanying the final judgment, the Internal Coalition to End Transplant Abuse in China called on the international community to help bring an end to the forced organ extraction. Susie Hughes, the executive director and co-founder of the coalition, stated, quote, "It is no longer a question of whether organ harvesting in China is happening. That dialogue is well and truly over. We need an urgent response to save these people's lives," end quote. And unfortunately, it's not just the organs that they're harvesting from these people as well. It's even human hair has become a huge market export from China. Border officials say that shipments contained 13 tons of weaves and other hair products worth an estimation of over $800,000 has been seized. And this is just in the recent months. Evidently, this is the second time this year that the Customs and Border Patrol has issued a rare detention order on shipments of hair products from China based on suspicions of human rights abuses. Xinjiang authorities announced in December of last year that the camps had closed and that all the detainees had, quote, graduated. They graduated. They got their little cap and gown and, they went off and partied and, now they're off doing some internship at some shitty place somewhere or whatever, starting their careers, Marcus. That's probably the most hardcore euphemism of all is just the graduated, dude. You're what does that mean? So they're no longer sick and they're out amongst the population, or they're just no longer a problem because they're fucking gone.
What did they use in the movie The Island? They won the lottery.
Love that movie. Yes. Yeah. They claim that these camps are closed and that all these detainees graduated is a claim that's difficult to collaborate independently, given the tight surveillance and restrictions on information in the region. Except, of course, for the latest horrific drone footage that was just leaked out literally 3 days ago. Yeah. God, I don't know. What do you think, Mark? Almost 100 people in rows on their knees, blindfolded and shackled basically, and all their heads are shaved. And there's just a bunch of soldiers marching around, a bunch of fucking stormtroopers marching around, keeping them all in line.
It wouldn't look out of place in some kind of fucked up sci-fi movie, dystopian.
Yes, dude, or straight up World War II. Never forget. Yeah, it's pretty brutal. And they're all at a train station, sitting on their knees, literally waiting to. Let's hope that's not the end of that topic, and we, as human beings, maybe start piping up a little bit louder in the international community for these type of blatant anti-human practices, I guess.
Yeah.
All right, number 4 on the list of depressing places that human beings have created is called the Salt Pit. Not to be
the gravel pit?
Not to be confused, yes, with the Peach Pit from 90210.
Check out my gravel pit.
So the Salt Pit is basically a colloquial term for a colloquial name rather, for an isolated CIA black site rumored to be the first in Afghanistan. Functioned literally as an underground prison used for, quote, enhanced interrogation, which, of course, as we know, is just torture. This was just after 9/11 when the American Intelligence Agency needed information on Al-Qaeda. And in 2014, the government declassified a U.S. Senate report on the CIA's detention and interrogation program operating inside Afghanistan. Of all the initial plan called for the Afghan government to operate the site, it actually was overseen by the CIA from the very, very beginning. The CIA authorized more than $200,000 for the construction of this prison. Ultimately, the prison housed, at one point or another, nearly half of the 119 detainees identified by the Senate Intelligence Committee report on CIA torture. And the prison was dark at all times, with curtains and painted exterior windows, I guess on the surface levels. Loud music was played consistently.
And it was Spice Girls, too, just to make it even worse.
That and what was that I'm a Barbie Girl song? Just on repeat 24/7, which would be enough to make any man insane. These prisoners were kept in total darkness and isolation, with only a bucket for human waste and without sufficient heat in the winter months. Nude prisoners were kept in central areas and walked around as a form of humiliation.
And that's just really gross because you think about why these people are there and they think, oh, it's justified. These people came in and they blew up the fucking World Trade Center.
Yeah. These guys were part of it or whatever. And if they're not part of it, they know about it or they know somebody who knows about it. Yeah. It's my favorite tag from that era. All of these things that aren't related also maybe linked to Al-Qaeda. Because if you say may, then, you can be wrong. It's fine, Yeah. It turns out it wasn't linked to Al-Qaeda.
Oh, whoops. Fucked up that country. Whoops.
The detainees were hosed down with water while shackled naked and placed in cold cells. They were subject to sleep deprivation, shackled to bars with their hands above their heads. So that's called stress positions. Yeah. One senior interrogator said that his team found a detainee who had been chained in the standing position for 17 days. Good God. A senior CIA debriefer told the CIA Inspector General that she heard stories of detainees hung for days on end with their toes barely touching the ground, choked and being deprived of food, and made the subject of mock executions. Which I don't know what the fuck that means. Maybe putting pretending to put a round in the chamber and then putting the gun up to the temple and I'm grasping at straws, dude. But that's what that type of shit is what it sounds like to me. Yeah. There were almost no detailed records of the detentions and interrogations during the earliest days of the site's existence. So for the first year or two, there wasn't a single rotated schedule or who checked into where and spent as much time in the cell and what happened to the detainee, and did they need medical attention? And none of that stuff, dude. Just
free reign.
Dark. Yes. No oversight. Throughout interviews conducted in 2003 with the CIA Office of Inspector General, top CIA leadership and attorneys claimed that they had little knowledge of the site's operations. What you won't know won't hurt you. To be fair, I mean, when they brought all this stuff forward without any evidence first, would you just be like, oh shit, yep, you caught me. Been doing super illegal stuff last couple of years or whatever. I mean, in the name of freedom and shit, but Number 5 on the list is a place called Homan Square, which is an abandoned factory turned off the books torture and interrogation compound in Chicago. Marcus, have you heard about this?
I don't think so.
Basically, since the early 80s, official investigations emanating out of Chicago, Illinois is actually West Side, have responded to numerous allegations against former Commander Joe Burge, who has been accused of abusing more than 200 mostly African-American men from 1972 to 1991 in order to coerce confessions of crimes. Alleged victims claimed that Burge and his crew of detectives had him beaten, suffocated, burned, threatened electric shock treatment. So basically, this was just an inner city abandoned factory compound, a black site inside of America, dude. Yes, in Chicago, and it wasn't even that the U.S. military was using it or anything. It was the fucking police department, dude. Yeah. They were taking suspects here, again, no Overwatch, and doing just the fucking crazy, Eastern Bloc, the worst days of Russia type policing, interrogation and stuff. Right. Additional alleged police practices were keeping arrestees out of official booking databases. So again, no oversight and no records. Being beaten, shackled with prolonged periods, again, stress positions, denying attorney access, holding people without legal counsel for between 12 and 24 hours, and including people as young as 15. In 1993, no, in the community, not at all. No, you're doing good policing, dude. Chicago definitely doesn't have any problems whatsoever for the last 30 years being run by the same political side of the spectrum. Shake it up a little bit, fucking over there, Chicago. Vote for some other fucking people, for God's sakes. In 1993, Burgess was fired from the department, thank God, and is currently collecting his police pension. So good for him. Mm-hmm. However, though, in the summer of 2006, special prosecutors completing a 4-year investigation concluded that they had enough evidence to prove crimes against Burge and others, but, quote, regrettably could not bring charges because the statute of limitations had passed.
Oh, of course.
It's brutal, huh? Because it's not murder and it's not rape, and it's like there's only a couple that don't have a statute of limitations or whatever, but this, unfortunately, none of these charges were one of those. In January of 2008, the city council approved a $19.8 million settlement with 4 men who claimed abuse by Burgess and his men. In October of 2008, Patrick J. Fitzgerald, United States Attorney for the Northern District of Illinois, had Burgess arrested on charges of obstruction of justice, perjury in relation to civil suits regarding the torture allegations against him.
Okay, so they got him on civil.
It's starting to, it's exactly, like, because the criminal ones, right? Yeah. It's just it's like the OJ thing or whatever, right? Yeah. You're like, well, if I can't get you this way, you piece of shit, I'm going to try to find another way to get you.
Right.
Burgess was eventually convicted on all counts on June 28th, 2010, and was sentenced to 4.5 years in federal prison on January 21st, 2011, which is far too short, in my opinion, especially if he barely does the bottom number. Most of the times, if you get like a charge, there's like a range of a number that you do or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, unfortunately, when I went in for as a visitor at a certain area, they threw a 1 to 10 at me. So I'd have to do the bottom number, which is 1 year.
Right.
But I could possibly do the top number, which is 10 years, which is insane. They never do something like that. Usually it's a 12 to 36 like month thing or whatever, and you always do the bottom number with maxed at the top. So I'm hoping that this piece of shit, the 4 years was the bottom number. It's like, you have to serve at least 4 before we can even consider letting your bitch ass out. Yeah, right. Totally.
Imagine that.
Right. Yeah, right, dude. That's perfect. On May 6, 2015, Chicago City Council approved reparations of $5.5 million to additional victims of torture, spending $100 million in previous legal settlements. In addition, an apology was offered to promise to teach children about these historical events. So, it took a long time. The dude that perpetrated it got kind of punished. I mean, he definitely got punished. 4 years. I mean, but it is nice to see that the state and the city were like, okay, maybe we should not only just put this guy in jail. Yeah, let's help people out with a little bit of money, and also making it like mandating to teach the horrible things that happened here.
Yeah.
Which I like.
Definitely.
I like remembering the ugly parts of history so that we can remind ourselves not to fuck up that bad again. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I mean,
to see the signs.
Yes, exactly. That's why history is so important, even the ugly parts of it. You know what I mean? Even if certain parts people don't really want to like look at, it's
pretend it didn't happen.
Yeah, I think that's worse when people like remember back in September 11th or after September 11th, they started taking like all the pictures of the Twin Towers like out of movies for a minute. And when they would play like on TV and stuff, they would literally clip parts of the show because they had the pictures of the Twin Towers because it was just too traumatic, dude. I just couldn't watch it anymore, which is so dumb, dude. It's like, no, let's remember that terrible shit happened, dude. Like, we have to own it. Like,
that's not the example I thought you were going with, but yeah, it's totally.
Oh, I could pick 1,000 of them, but you know what I mean? Yeah. The point still stands.
Yeah.
So number 6 on the list, floating prisons.
Because they're at sea.
Legal ones, though. But yes, yes. I found this part really interesting.
Say, like, it's a prison on a submarine in international waters.
Oh, that'd be terrifying.
So we dock in
So
here.
we're going to talk about that actually later as far as fucking... So anyway, back in 2012, the U.S. Southern Command was tasked with leading the war on drugs in the Americas. Consequently launched a multinational military campaign called Operation Martillo, or Martillo, I guess if you spell it or pronounce it properly. Its mission goal was to use the Coast Guard to prevent the passage of hard drugs originating from South America and being smuggled into Central America.
Sounds good.
Right? Delicious. Uncut. When smugglers are apprehended, they are shackled and put into the brig, which is just, like a cell, till arrangements can be made for them to be transported back to the mainland for trial. However, this process can sometimes take weeks or even months.
I don't want to do that paperwork.
Yeah, right, dude. Just leave them in there, dude. But if you think about it, it would be a pain in the ass to get that ball rolling of like contacting the country of origin from these people and be like, hey, we have one of your citizens and we allege that they did this thing and that thing and we want to extradite them back, but here's like the process and and then paperwork and getting back to you.
But that's their job.
No, of course, for sure. But just the ball of
legality.
Yeah, let's use that, I guess. Yeah, rolls like slowly, basically. But learning about this gave me the idea for like the best movie idea ever. It was similar to that one that was that best 90s action documentary of all time, Face Off, where they have like the secret like detention facility that's like an offshore, off the books detention facility that's like on an offshore oil derrick, where the prisoners wear like magnetic boots and shit and keep them like locked to the floor. Right. So this idea for the movie is what I was telling you about before. It was like the protagonist wakes up. He has no idea where he is. It's dark, cuffed to like a small cot. You can hear faintly like the voices of other potential detainees, but it's in different languages, so you don't know what they're saying. You know, over time, prisoners kind of come and go. Over time, like the main character comes to realize that basically he's on a converted oil tanker that's been turned into like a floating prison that is like mobile interrogation.
In order to avoid certain legal complications,
right, dude?
The ships are
always in motion. And, yeah, dude, and you'd have no oversight and it'd be total secret and it'd be mobile, dude. So you could go around in international waters and nobody would even know where you were or how to get to you. Like, that's terrifying to me.
Party boat.
Yeah, right,
because
dude.
of the implication.
So I found that horrifying, but also, like, super interesting. So anyway, freaking such dark shit or whatever. But all this kind of makes me wonder about, like, you know, what horrors human beings have in store for each other in the future. You know what I mean? Because with the advancements of like technology or whatever, anything is possible, right? It kind of reminded me of thinking about that historical space documentary, Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. It's actually super good. Actually, it deals with not only like interstellar conflict and stuff, but like false flags and how getting people to believe a certain thing can cause upheaval and war between people who are trying to actually like create like a
coalesce.
Yeah, exactly. It was pretty cool because it kind of features this like subterranean Klingon gulag called Ruapente, which is like built on an asteroid in like a remote fucking part of space. It's known throughout the galaxy as the alien graveyard.
You ain't getting out of there.
No, and that's the point. And this prison, this is what he says in the movie. He says this prison has like no stockade, no guard towers, no electronic frontier, just a electronic, magnetic shield that prevents beaming. So you can't get off the surface.
Even, like beam somebody out.
No, it's like, and if you go up to the surface, it's just ice and rock. You know what I mean? So you go up there and it's like 100 below and like no sun,
right.
Like it's dark, snowy, and like you can't get off of the planet or whatever. And basically there's only one like punishment, and that's exile from prison below to the surface. And he says, on the surface, nothing can survive. And like there's all these new guys that they're bringing in or whatever. And so in order to teach them like a lesson, they just bring a dude out in his t-shirt basically or whatever, you know what I'm saying? And they just throw him onto the surface or whatever, where everybody else is bundled up with these big like bear coats and shit like that on or whatever. And they're like walking into like underground into like the little stairway or whatever. And they're like walking by this guy who's like just shivering uncontrollably. And literally within like 45 seconds, he's fucking dead basically because it's just so cold. As dark and lame as these things are, it's really important to talk about them because we're trying to progress, right? And kind of leave all the shittier parts of human nature behind. If we can kind of do that collectively. We have to do better, dude.
Well, actually, there is some hope. There's work being done. Bills are trying to be pushed through. There are representatives who are trying to fix this.
Yeah, what I mean, whether that sees the light of day or not, or whatever.
Whether it gets passed or it gets stuck in the political ping pong game that we have.
Political purgatory.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not so bad. I mean, it's not great, but it's not so bad. There's a couple of things, thankfully, that have been kind of on the horizon just recently or even just in the past year. For instance, the First Step Act, which was like a bipartisan effort, which is
rare.
In this day and age, it's like impossible to get. And basically, it just lays out that, between 60 and 70 million Americans have criminal records, which is kind of crazy. And you mentioned earlier that 2.2 million of Americans are incarcerated at this. That's costing American taxpayers over $182 billion annually. Oof. When you add up all the stuff, not just the incarcerations, but like all the little tacited connections or whatever.
So about Facebook's daily revenue.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. A single day maybe in like Amazon's budget, basically. The First Step Act, the formerly incarcerated re-enter society transformed safely transitioning every person act.
God, politicians love those acronyms, dude.
Yeah, totally. When it fits, it's fine. But when you're like desperately trying to like make it work.
Well, that's the thing. It's like they feel like it has to have one to get the public behind it.
Which is fucked because that's actually partially true. Like psychologically speaking, is like if people,
that's why they do it.
Yeah, exactly. Or people like if it doesn't have like a nice name, I can't.
Did you hear about the Trump Act?
No.
It's the tax returns uniformly made public.
Oh, that's hilarious. Yeah. Oh, of course, because they want him to put his fucking shit out.
Or GENDA, GENDA.
Okay.
It's the gender expression non-discrimination.
Oh my God.
GENDA. The best one. I think the two best ones.
Sorry, go ahead.
So the best one I think was the acronym ACT.
That can't be real. Fuck off, dude.
It is. And it's accountability and congressional responsibility on naming your motions. As a dude who's sick with all the freaking acronyms, and so he tried to pass
named it with an acronym. That's hilarious, dude. Oh my god, you couldn't. Oh my god, you couldn't cut that with a knife if you had to, dude. It's so tight.
No, really, the best one, though, of course, is the USA Patriot Act. The uniting and strengthening America by providing appropriate tools required to intercept and obstruct terrorism.
Fuck off, dude. Like, you know what's hilarious is I guarantee you, like, military dudes all came up with this shit because the military is just chock full of acronyms, dude.
That's
like,
true.
It's like a running joke among all the militaries that, like, well, if it's not an acronym, it can't fucking, it can't happen.
Yeah. But anyway, it is not to detract from the work itself because
it is pretty hilarious, though. No, totally. This, as hilarious as all of this is, we truly and sincerely hope that like political buttholes can get their shit together and kind of come together on a bipartisan act or whatever and do some good for their constituents. If it's okay, if it's not too much to ask. It's your fucking job. It was a bipartisan criminal bill passed by the 115th Congress and signed by President Trump in December of 2018, so just a little while ago. And the First Step Act, among other changes, reforms federal prisons and sentencing laws in order to reduce recidivism, which of course is just going back into jail, which is a huge problem. Yep. Decrease the federal inmate population and maintain public safety. It's pretty much the greatest widespread change in the federal government's incarceration system since the crime bill of like 94 that I think Clinton signed. It's a sentencing and reform bill focusing predominantly on federal prisons and inmates. So this is just the First Step Act only focuses on federal prisons because again, like Trump said, it's like, it's just the first step. Big first step, can be more. And it includes mandating that inmates be held within 500 miles of their family instead of shipping them across the fucking country or wherever. Giving inmates an official form of ID before release, which I didn't actually realize is actually a big deal.
It can be.
Big time, dude. If you're having gone through a lot of this stuff that we're talking about, it's so important to be able to come out with all the tools in your belt to try to fight off the recidivism.
Exactly. That's definitely
because it's like being a drug addict. Mm-hmm. When you get taken out of something, like when you go to rehab or whatever the fuck, it's so easy to fall back into it, dude, because it's what you know. Dude. Exactly. You're set up to fail, bro. Because the expectations are too high. Yeah. If you don't have the tools to do that, you're going to fucking fail, dude. You're going to hang out with the same old people again. You're going to go to the same
You can't
spots.
Get a job. You can't get
Right. So why not start selling fucking crack or drugs or whatever, heroin or pills or whatever the fuck, dude. Whatever gets you money, dude. Right? Number 3, outlaw the shackling of pregnant women. Which I didn't even know was a thing. Because, like, dude, if you shackle a woman's ankles or something, dude, when they're all fucking swollen, got like mad cankles because of fucking they're carrying a goddamn human being inside of them or whatever. You know what I mean? I could see where that could be a problem. 4, trading days of prison sentences for participating in training and educational programs.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That makes total sense, dude. Like, okay, like a 1-for-1. Like trade, that sounds good.
Did they bring back any of the higher education stuff?
Yes. Okay. So before they were back in the day allowed, but now I don't even know when this changed. Actually, I know it's a 30-year. I know I'm gonna have to do some more homework on that. But basically, it's not allowed for inmates in the United States to, whether it's a state or federal, definitely federal, to further your education to get a higher degree or certification. Right. Which to me is so fucking ass backwards, dude.
Well, it is back ass.
Yeah, right. Exactly. You would think that instead of having them go in there to learn how to be better criminals, you would hope and incentivize them to further their education so that, again, when they leave, they have more tools. Yes, dude.
And a lot of the time I could imagine people got in there because they aren't educated. They didn't
Guaranteed,
know.
dude. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So why would we want to give them a better chance of like not coming back, right?
They're supposed to rehabilitate people.
Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah, exactly. If prisons do rehabilitate people or whatever, maybe we should throw some fucking knowledge at them, dude. I don't know. I'm just sitting here with my beer. What am I supposed to do? Number 5 has reduced the mandatory minimum sentencing for non-violent drug offenders. Okay. That is huge, dude. Huge. Not only is it like destroying cultures and communities and stuff like that by incarcerating these people, it just doesn't make any sense on a logistical standpoint. You know what I mean? Like we got to be spending a shit ton of money on somebody who just sold a couple of grams of weed or something like that, or maybe a couple ounces, whatever. Like it doesn't matter. Like if it's nonviolent, I don't give a fuck. Right. Dude. I mean, unless you're like literally posting up and like selling to school children, then I might be, but other than that,
Yeah.
Finally, reduces the 3-strike penalty.
Oh, okay.
Which I need to do more research on where that even came from.
I thought that was like a state policy. I didn't know that was a federal thing.
Evidently, and I wonder if it's even like a policy or if it's just like a full-on like.
Or do they just like outlaw it?
Yeah,
so no states could do it.
Oh, word. Okay. Yeah, I actually don't even know, but like I was wondering if that's maybe just like a cultural thing of like baseball and being like, well, you fuck up 3 times, bro. We can all agree that, 3 times is the limit. Anyway, next on the list of things that are, hopefully going to be continually going our way as a society is something called opportunity zones, which is something that was championed by South Carolina Senator Tim Scott. And basically the point of it is to increase corporate incentives in localized impoverished areas
to
try to bring business into these neighborhoods to provide jobs, basically, right? Because obviously that's super important. If you have a job, you have meaning. Big time, right? Yeah. Totally. Basically what they do is they provide tax incentives.
Yeah, of course.
Of course, right? Basically, if you sign on to a specific dollar amount as well as a 5 to 7 year commitment, I think is what he was saying, then you will get a straight up 10-year corporate capital gains tax furlough or whatever.
Right. As long as there's no loopholes and it doesn't get exploited and the companies actually
I'm
stay there.
sure that'll be a little bit of that guaranteed, probably.
Well,
but
on paper, it sounds great.
No, totally. And that's one of those things about America is that let's try it out in some of these spots and let's get some data from these spots and let's see if it's working or if it's hell of not or if, it's working, but it needs this or that. And finally, on this short list here, we have the police reform bill that, again, was championed and spearheaded by Senator Tim Scott. It incentivizes law enforcement agencies to ban the use of chokeholds by tying funding to whether, departments have prohibited the practice itself.
Oh, interesting.
Yes. And so, although there is a caveat, it says, quote, except when deadly force is authorized, end quote. So again, it's kind of one of those, to me, it sounds like the arresting officer or whoever is in immediate fear for their life because they're being assaulted or whatever. No, of course, this is going to have to go to a case by case.
Yeah.
What does that mean? You know what I mean? Freaking deadly force is authorized. Authorized when and on who and where and you know what I mean? But the fact that they're looking at the chokehold concept, just banning it kind of outright or whatever, it could be seen as a progressive. Now, I have heard from a lot of, not personally, but from officers and stuff that kind of are worried about, well, dude, if I can't restrain the person, I only have other 2 options, which is less than lethal weapon or a fully lethal weapon, right? Which I'd rather give police officers more tools, not physical tools, but you know what I mean? Options to doing things or whatever. Right. But I'm no expert, dude, so who knows? We'll have to follow it and see what happens, like most things. It also ramps up data collection efforts to track when an officer's use of force results in the death or serious harm.
Good.
Right? More info's better, dude. Yeah. Fucking more discussion is better.
Thing we said in the gun debate.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yes. We need hard evidence. Hard data, rather. Provide federal money for additional training on alternatives to the use of force.
Good.
Yes, that's right? Great. Let's train our officers to not be like, oh, God, I have to shoot them. Include language recognizing the history of lynching in the United States. This was surprising to me. That basically...
what does that mean exactly?
Again, it's all in the bill. Unfortunately, we could have read more of it if it got passed, unfortunately. I mean, it's still out there. You can still read it. It's not one of those things that Nancy Pelosi said a couple of years ago. It was well, if we have to pass it to see what's in it.
Oh, God.
I don't know if they do that. I know, it was just the dumbest fucking thing ever, which is just I'm pretty sure both sides of the aisle can be like, what? That's not a thing.
You're really just saying I wanted to sneak everything
in here. In addition, strengthening penalties for falsifying police reports. If you can prove it, then the penalty should be fucking high, dude, because we give police officers specifically, and authority figures in general, a lot more leeway for things, you know what I mean? Because they have the authority to do, you know what I mean? That the average citizen or American can't do.
Yeah.
And I think that's okay if they're held to a higher standard.
Sure.
It's yeah, dude, you're allowed to have these powers and stuff that nobody else has, detaining
access
somebody,
to
killing, access to records, inside. Yeah. But if you fuck up, dude, your leeway is this fucking big. And if anybody out there in Radio Land can see my fingers, they're so close together right now. In addition, create a commission to study issues that affect black men and boys, which I think is huge. Not necessarily just, but all men, I think, there needs to be more studies on the issues that affect men in America.
Okay.
So anyway, some of that stuff sounds really good. This bill was a large percentage of what a lot of the Democrats wanted. Senator Tim Scott said it was like 70% of what they wanted. Some of the things I just read. Okay. I don't know how accurate that number is, but there's definitely things in here that were bipartisan, big time. Mm-hmm. And it's really unfortunate that it didn't pass because they only needed 7 Democrats to pass it, dude. And not one of them wanted to step to the other side of the aisle. Not even to the other side of the aisle. Just on the side of logic and reason and just be like, okay, look, in the wake. Line, dude. That's and it's lame, dude, because like in the wake of the George Floyd things and in all of it, dude, all of the fucking terrible shit that's been happening or whatever, you would hope that politicians would not use this as a club to wield over their constituents and voters or whatever coming this November, because it's exactly why they shot it down. Yeah, exactly. Help their fucking constituents, dude. Like the people that vote for, the people that keep them in jobs. Yeah. You're only there to serve us, dude. Yeah. And you're sitting there playing these games or whatever because you don't like this person or that person or whatever. You know what I mean? It's sad, dude. And it bums me out. And it makes me realize that if that type of shit continues, dude, this country's done. If people can't even agree on shit that everybody agrees on because they don't like somebody or they don't like the other side or whatever, you know, they don't like the message is fine. It's who's delivering the message that they have a fucking problem with, dude. And I think that is dangerous and, you know, defeats the whole purpose of this whole thing. So, I don't know. Here's hoping.
It's amazing what you'll find face to face.
Do you enjoy the show and want to help it grow? Don't hesitate. Like, share, and donate.
That's what's so great about the human condition, bro. If you make a super gangster like lock, you know, a high-tech new gangster lock that nobody can fucking open, you just invented somebody who's going to a better lock picker, dude.
Right.
You know what I mean? You can't stop progress, bro. It's impossible.
Here's another prison. We broke out, oh, fuck. What was his name?
Andy Dufresne?
No.
Andy Dufresne.
No.
El Chapo?
El Chapo, thank you.
Oh, nice.
That's the one I was going to talk about.
Nice. He broke out twice.
Exactly.
I should have had that on here, dude. Fucking the way they did that one, dude, where they
it's
like...
elaborate as hell.
Oh, so elaborate, dude. So this dude has like millions of dollars or whatever, right? El Chapo. So he had like create a shell company, like a straight up CIA, like 1970s CIA shell company. Right. Pretend you're a construction company, buy a piece of land just next to the prison, basically, like across the street, start construction with just a bunch of like trucks driving around and people throwing up wood framed stuff and concrete. But really what you're fucking doing is you have a crew of dudes digging underneath that shit, dude. And they would never be able to hear any vibrations or noise because they're like, oh, well, that's just next door with all the concrete and shit. Yeah, totally. And so after they dug his ass there, they busted into like the shower, dropped his ass in there and had this little like unicycle with a motor on it and fucking like drove his ass like fucking however many hundreds of yards or 1,000 yards or whatever to the extraction zone, up into a truck, gone, dude. Yeah. Awesome. Human beings are nuts, dude.
I don't like the guy.
No, I have no idea about
like the hustle.
No, absolutely. For all intents and purposes, from what I've heard, this guy's a fucking monster. I just happen to highly respect the ingenuity of human beings trying to like, you know, do a thing.
Right. Oh, every time this touches this, it makes this fucking bell noise.
Oh, put like a soccer t-shirt. There you go.
That's what I'm talking about, dude. I don't want to do this fucking ghetto shit anymore. I just want a setup.
I know. Where it can just work.
Hit record.
Yeah.
And we're fucking good.
Yeah, instead of taking like 45 minutes to fucking get everything ready. One day. We'll make it to California someday, Marcus.
Things will be better when we reach California.
Yeah, exactly. You comfortable with how it's going to sound and everything, though?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not going to be the same.
It's not going to be like the moon landing episode?
God, no.
Okay.
No,
just wanted to make sure. We have some standards here, Marcus. Not many, but few.
Okay. Yay, we can record now. Yay. Oops, except I need to...
Shit.
Trying to build a prison.
Dun 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 dun.